Good morning all, welcome to Falkirk Council Planning Committee on the 8th of October 2025, held in the Education Centre, Abbots Road, Grangemouth. In accordance with Section 43 of the Local Government Act Scotland 2003, allows attendance by elected members online, and this meeting is being live streamed at falkirk.gov.uk/live. I'm Councillor Ralph Kelly and I'm the Deputy Convener of the committee. On my right are the members.
Bailey James Kerr, member of the Planning Committee.
Councillor Jack Redmond, Planning Committee member.
And online?
Councillor Jim Flynn, member of the Planning Committee.
Councillor Margaret Anslow, member of the Planning Committee.
Councillor Ian Sinclair, same.
Kelly Buchanan, same.
Okay, thanks everyone. And on my left are the members of the, the officers of the committee.
I'm Colin Moody, the Council's Chief Governance Officer.
Douglas Blythe, Team Leader, Legal Services.
Bernard Whittle, Development Management Coordinator.
Karen Strang, Strategy and Development Coordinator, Housing.
Kate McFarlane, Service Development Officer for Housing.
Brent Vivian, Development Management, Senior Planning Officer.
Kevin Brown, Planning Officer and Development Management.
Harley Tolan, the Committee Officer.
Thank you. And Councillor Bowes is of the committee has just joined us.
Thank you, Convener. I apologise for being late.
Do we have any apologies?
Yes, Convener, we have apologies from Provost Bissett, from Councillor Colley, from Councillor Forrest, and also from Councillor Murtagh.
Thank you. Any declarations of interest? Any declarations of interest? For information, members should declare any financial or non-financial interests they have in any item of business of the meeting and identifying the relevant interest and nature of the interest. No, thank you. Minute of the previous meeting. Take it everybody's read that. Can we agree to accept?
Agree.
Agreed. Thank you. Thank you. We will move then immediately to agenda item 4. Agenda item 4, which is P25/0144 FUL, construction of 2 dwelling houses and garage at the site to the east of Middlebank, Knocklongcroft. Brent.
Thank you, Deputy Convener. Members will recall that this application was considered at the September committee when it was agreed to continue the application to allow committee members to visit the site. The site visit took place on the 29th of September. Just to remind committee, this application seeks full planning permission for the construction of 2 4-bedroom, 1.5-storey dwelling houses. As previously highlighted, the site benefits from the grant of planning permission in principle that was granted on the 29th of September 2023 by committee, and that planning permission in principle was also for the construction of 2 dwelling houses. However, a standalone full planning application has now been submitted rather than an application for approval of matters specified in conditions, and that is due to some boundary changes to the original application site. As previously advised, the application requires consideration by the Planning Committee as it is assessed overall as contrary to the development plan. However, the planning history of the site is a strong material planning consideration, and the extant planning permission in principle for the construction of 2 dwelling houses on the site is considered to justify approval of the application on this occasion. The application is therefore recommended for approval subject to the conditions as detailed in section 9 of the report. Thank you.
Thanks, Brent. Before we move on, can I just clarify something? At the previous meeting, this is continued from, I questioned whether we had done a site visit then or not, and why we hadn't done it. And Councillor Sinclair said that we'd all been at the meeting. We should have, if we wanted a call, we could have called it. I was at the meeting, but I know the Sutherland, but I left before the last 3 meetings, and that's why the last 3 applications, and that's why I never called for sites at that time. But we have had the site visit. Said just to clarify that wee bit. I thought it was going off my head at first. I couldn't think why I didn't call it in at the time. Thank you. Okay then. Any members got questions? Councillor Bowes? No one on the line? Bailey Buchanan.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me, convener?
Yes, thanks.
Fine, thank you. I'd just like to just go back to Brent for a minute in relation to the extant planning permission that was granted in 2023. Brent, I'm just wondering if you could maybe give us your professional opinion on the issue of what the legal position would be in terms of planning if members were to refuse this morning and regarding the history. Thank you.
Well, in terms of the planning permission in principle, if this current application was refused, the applicant would still have the option of putting in an application for approval of matters specified in conditions, albeit they would have to reflect the size of the original application site that was subject to the original PPP application. So there would still be that option of an application coming forward within the terms of the previous PPP permission. And in that case, we wouldn't be considering the principle because that's already established. We'd be considering the detailed proposals.
Okay, thank you, Brent. Considering and listening to Brent, and obviously it was one of the members that was out on the site visit, I'm quite happy to move the recommendation at this case as to grant the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sinclair.
Yeah, just to save time on this, because I think there was a fair amount of questioning in the last session. I'm content to second Bailey Buchanan on this. I think I moved the officer's recommendations at the last committee meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask Brent, there's what was known as a claim to be a dilapidated cottage by Mr. Gill, the agent. And when we were up on the site visit, we saw that was actually getting worked on in some way. Do you have any knowledge of this?
Yeah, she's quite right. We observed, obviously, there's work being carried on to a building which was on the original site. I did go back to the current the agent for the current application just to try and clarify the nature of those works. The original site has now been subdivided, so it's been sold off. The current application site is a separate ownership from the balance of the original property. So the current agent was unable to provide me with any information on who the current owner of the balance of the property is, or any indication of the nature of the the works being carried out. So I don't have that information for you today. I mean, to take that point forward, it would probably be a case of trying to contact the original applicant for the PPP to try and get some more information on that.
Okay, thanks a lot for that. Anyone, any other questions? No. So we'll just go to debate on this now. Any opinions? No. Well, I agree that many of the problems could probably be dealt with by condition. The road has a number of vehicles that use it. When the motorway is gridlocked, like last Friday, it's absolutely nightmare. This has no pavement, no lighting, very narrow road, a single track road actually, without any proper laybys to allow for passing traffic. The housing is family housing with 4 bedrooms. I believe, am I right there, Brent? It's 4 bedrooms. So you're looking at 8 possible, 6 possibly children in that house. We'll have to use this road. No lighting, no pavement, narrow road. I think it's very dangerous. I don't think it would be fair actually to grant this. I know in the past there was a young guy come down that road. The road goes on to the A803, and he come down a bicycle, him and his friend, and couldn't stop at the bottom of the hill. Went on to the 803 and was hit by a car. And the guy is still in terrible condition. He's got more metal in him than most of the modern cars have. But I see that as a very dangerous road for children to be on. How they're going to get down to the bottom of it's about a 15-minute walk in a good day. To get to school, buses can't go up there. I don't agree that while, as I say, the rest can be conditioned, but the road can't be. And I think we should reject this. Okay, so I'll move for rejection of the housing as it stands. Have we got a seconder? Billy Buchanan.
I'd just like to, through your good self, convener, I would just like to reiterate the question that I asked Brent at the very start in relation to what the position would be if this was refused. And I think Brent was very clear and concise in relation to the fact is that this site, the strong material planning consideration is the extent planning permission. So I think members should be aware of that before they take any decision. Thank you very much.
On that, I think they can reapply for a different type of housing. Would that be right, Brent?
Well, they could bring forward an application for approval of matters specified within the terms of the planning permission in principle, which is a slightly smaller site. So it's possible they might have to adjust their proposal to fit in with the previously approved smaller site. So that could, by implication, mean slightly smaller dwelling houses.
And the housing itself. And the housing itself in size.
Well, potentially
would shrink
they might
accordingly.
They might have
okay.
Potentially.
Yeah, sorry. So just to clarify what you're saying, Brent. So if this was refused, it can matter for matters of specification, there would still be 2 houses on that site. But a bit smaller.
Yes, well, the PPP was specific. It was specific to 2 houses, so there is approval in principle for 2 houses on the site.
Thanks, Brent. I'm quite content to support the motion by Bailey Buchanan and Councillor Sinclair. Thanks.
Okay. And I'm putting an amendment up that we refuse permission on the grounds of safety, of road safety for children or adults as well, since there's no pavement or lighting on the road. Do we have a seconder for that?
I think just having listened to what's went on, and I think we do have to be careful, obviously, with the consistency in what decision making, but I think maybe initially, as a tight road to get up there, there's a few issues with the site. I think if it had been in the original site, I would have probably said, well, there's no way we can go the amendment, but since they have enlarged the site, there are larger houses, it is going to be more traffic on the road. Potentially, I think that may be a better option if I second the amendment and you come back with a development within the original planning permission in principle site, rather than, I think this might just be expanding it a bit too much, so I'll have to second.
Thank you. Sorry. Councillor Bowes.
Thank you very much. Ben, just to confirm on the PPP, I would guess that it doesn't tell you the size of the house. It just says 2 properties, because most PPPs don't actually give you that kind of detail. My worry about bringing it down to the smaller size is that you're still going to have 2 reasonable size. The ratio, bringing the house down size, is, I don't know how that's going to help. I may be wrong, but because it was years ago now that we actually looked at it. Whether I would be in favour at the time, I don't know. I've not checked that. But it's something that passed at that time. PPP obviously becomes a strong material element in it. So ultimately, I'm leaning towards being in favour of the officer's recommendation. But I would just like to know that.
Thanks, Councillor. Gary McGregor, can you...
Sorry.
Sorry.
I did ask a question. Were the sizes of the houses marked in the original PPP?
I'm just trying to think back. I'm pretty sure there was an indicative site layout which would have showed the footprint for 2 houses. And if memory serves me correct, I think the indication was always from the outset that it would be for family 4-bedroom houses. But I doubt whether we would have had any specific dimensions around.
Okay, thanks.
This isn't the same point.
Oh, sorry. Right. Ms. Moody.
Just for the assistance of the committee, I have the committee report from 2023 in front of me, and it indicates that there's an indicative site layout plan accompanying the application showing the footprints for 2 4-bedroom detached dwelling houses.
Thank you. Councillor Flynn?
Yep, thank you, convener. I would just like to just make my thoughts and observations, and it's quite simple, is that before any new house is sold, the number of occupants that occupy that house is theoretical. You know, there's no saying that because it's 4-bedroom, there's going to be 4 people, 6 people, or whatever. You know, and similarly, if it was refused and then come back again to smaller houses, there may well be the same number of occupants in the smaller bedroom, so it wouldn't actually change, you know, the traffic, if you like, inverted commas, going up and down the road. So I think it's all theoretical at the moment, who's going to live in the house. So personally, I would actually support the motion. Thank you, convener.
Thanks, Mr. Flynn. Harry, you give your opinion on the roads.
Morning, convener. You've probably summed it up pretty well. I don't think I'll be able to add much more than what you stated earlier, convener. So yeah, we've obviously got concerns about pedestrian safety in there with the lack of footway and street lighting provision. As you know, it's an adopted rural road subject to national speed limit, 60 miles per hour, a relatively steep gradient. There is some areas a winding carriageway, so it'll be, visibility is difficult. So we've carried out a traffic survey in the area, and the visibility display that we've asked for is 2.4 metres back by 23 metres, which we feel can be met. However, you know, it does need reprofiling in the site if that was to be met. We feel that the introduction of new direct accesses onto our roads could give rise to an increased accident risk. And obviously, like you stated, the main carriageway to the south of the location is the 803, which is about a 10-15 minute walk from the site. So yeah, very much already like what you've stated, convener, but happy to answer any specific questions as well.
Okay, thanks again, Gary. Any other opinions? Anyone else? No. So we'll ask Mr. Moody.
Thank you, convener. And we have a motion moved by Bailey Buchanan and seconded by Councillor Sinclair, which is to the effect of granting the application in accordance with the recommendations in the report, against which there is an amendment from myself, convener, and seconded by Councillor Redmond. Councillor Anslow.
Amendment.
Councillor Bowes.
Motion.
Bailey Buchanan.
Motion.
Councillor Flynn.
Motion.
Councillor Kelly.
Amendment.
Bailey Kerr.
The motion.
Councillor Redmond.
Amendment.
Councillor Sinclair.
Motion.
There are 5 votes for the motion. There are 3 votes for the amendment. The motion is carried.
Thank you. So can we move on now to the next one, which is item 5 on the agenda, P25-007/75. And we have a deputation for this one, so I'd be willing to accept. We've got 2 deputations actually, Councillor McCabe and Mr. Harrington, the agent for the applicant. Can we agree that we are here?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Right. Kevin, that's you lead on it.
Thank you, convener. This application seeks modification of a Section 75 planning obligation associated with planning permission P20-0429 FUL, which granted detailed planning permission for 34 houses and 6 flats at Canalside Drive in Reddenmuir Head. The proposed modification seeks payment of a commuted sum in lieu of on-site provision of affordable housing. The proposed modification also seeks the introduction of phased payment arrangements to accommodate that commuted sum. Members will see from the report that no letters of representation have been received on this application, and that consultation with the Council's housing services has generated no objections. With this in mind, the primary focus of the assessment is made against the Council's affordable housing policy contained within the development plan and set out within supplementary guidance SG06 affordable housing. For context, the original planning application for this development secured the provision of 10 on-site social rent units to meet the 25% affordable housing requirements for this site. An absence of grant funding or a willing RSL partner has meant that this is no longer a viable option for this site. In line with the requirements of the Council supplementary guidance, the applicants have considered a series of alternative on-site delivery options. Unfortunately, in this instance, no on-site delivery options have proved to be viable, and a proposal has therefore been put forward for a commuted sum payment in lieu of on-site provision. The applicants have had extensive discussions with the Council's housing service throughout consideration of the application. The proposed commuted sum approach accords with the Council's development plan policies and guidance, And with that in mind, the officer recommendation to committee is to agree the proposed modification in this instance. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you. Got questions now? Any questions for the officer? Can I just ask, when you say it's not viable, what do you actually mean by that?
It's perhaps one for housing colleagues to come in on, but ultimately there's no grant funding available in this instance, and the on-site provision that was previously secured by the Section 75 agreement, that was for on-site delivery of social rented accommodation, and there's no RSL partner.
Totally understand that. Right, understand. Thanks. Really care.
Thanks, Convener. Over the last couple of planning committee meetings, we've asked certain applicants for financial viability proposal, where this company asked that at the original outset. Because I found it strange only the last 2 meetings we've asked for this. So I'm just wondering if we've asked people in if this company, if they had that.
Yeah, the application's been with us for some time. As I said in the preamble there's been extensive discussions with the Council's housing services in respect of the sequential approach which is set out in the supplementary guidance, in terms of our first option, our first preferred option always being on-site provision of social rent accommodation, and then they're following on-site provision of other types of tenures. At each turn, information has been provided to the council housing team to consider whether or not there are options open to provide on-site provision. Unfortunately, that's not been able to be achieved in this instance. So yes, there has been quite a lot of back and forth in terms of figures and what's available, whether there's grant funding available, what costs would be to provide various tenure types, and so on and so forth. But it's unfortunately not been achievable in this instance.
Right, thanks, Kevin. And I don't know the company at all. However, if this company, hypothetical here, if this company had another site, could they move that social housing allocation to another site? Or is it not too hypothetical?
I don't know if they have another site close by, unfortunately. I mean, there is sometimes the ability to be able to provide affordable housing off-site, which would potentially be on another development site nearby within sub-market areas. That would still be dependent on RSLs being interested in the site and there being grant funding available, presumably. So it would still be in the same position in that respect.
Thanks, Kevin. It's very difficult to bring RSLs on when a very small amount has been offered. And I know we're desperate as a local authority for social housing, desperate for them. However, putting that, I would call it a burden on some of these sites for 2, 3, 5, 8 houses for social. These big companies are looking for a bigger amount so they can justify them building. However, my last question for you is, the district valuers value 310,000 would be the commuted sum. If you just divide it by 40 houses, it's £7,750 per unit as an average. We will struggle to get anything with that amount of money. So how does the district valuer get to 310,000?
I think that perhaps is one from my housing colleagues there.
The district valuer, they look at the costs of sites round about, and they have a very extensive calculation. That's not really my expertise as to how the district valuer makes their calculation, but they are independent, and that's why we use district valuer, and it's paid for by the council and by the developer. So that both parties have an interest in what's delivered. But it's very much a very complicated calculation which is carried out by a district valuer who's a surveyor.
Thank you. Councillor Sinclair, did you have your light on there? No?
Yeah, I did, convener. Thank you for bringing me in. I just wanted to kind of seek further clarification on the viability question. My understanding from the reading of this is that there's not a question over the financial viability of the whole site. It's the viability of providing affordable housing on that site is in question. So, and I wondered if maybe the officer could, because we have had several discussions over financial viability in previous planning committee debates. I wonder if Mr. Brown could perhaps, or if another officer, if it's appropriate for another officer to explain that a bit further and clarify that for me.
Kevin?
Yeah, there can be a distinction between straight viability considerations on a site, just in terms of build costs alone. In this instance, what we're talking about here is it possible to achieve the 10 units on site, build out costs, all the rest of it, and in the absence of grant funding, the case has been made that would bring into question the ability to be able to achieve that on the site. That's really what we're talking about here.
So specifically in relation to those affordable housing units and not the whole site as a thing, as an entity.
I think they go hand in hand in some respects. The developer may wish to expand on that, but ultimately, if a developer has been asked to provide something which is overly expensive, in the absence of grant funding and so on, it does bring into question whether or not the rest of the site can be developed in a profitable way.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you both. Any other questions to the officer? Sorry, Jack. Councillor Redmond.
I suppose the first one you kind of touched on it there, but so are you saying that out of the 40 homes on the site, we would be expecting 25%, about 10 homes? How many homes were we expecting to get this originally?
Yeah, the original planning application, as you say, was for 40 units in total. And, because of the location of it, the development plan policy requires that 25% of those units be provided as affordable housing units. So that's 10 units in this instance. They were identified on a location plan as being terraced properties on the southern edge of the site. In the absence of RSL and so on, you then work through various options set out within the supplementary guidance to see whether or not there are any other delivery options available that are achievable on the site. That process has been gone through here, and ultimately we've got to the point where the only viable option for this particular site is the committed sum option, which is set out in the guidance as well.
Thanks, that makes sense. So I think of my next question. So it was all houses, was none of the flats were expected to be.
That was the original agreement. Yeah.
See, I don't know how well you'll know this, but could you maybe talk about how this normally works if an RSL can come on board? What sort of money would the developer be asked to input, and the RSL would be asked to maybe input some, and then obviously we would have their funding as well, Scottish Government and the Council as well?
Maybe defer to my housing colleagues again.
Could you clarify the question, please?
So if the developer's been asked to up 10 houses on the site. How would we look at funding that really? Would it be the developer would put a committed sum towards it, they would build it, plus you would have a grant from the Scottish Government, and then the RSL, what would they contribute? Would they take a loan on the properties over a amount of time or something?
Social rented housing requires grant, and it would require an RSL to want to take the site forward. The RSL would have a negotiation with the developer as to, would they give them land or would they give them houses, and they would negotiate a price. And the price would be lower if it was an affordable housing site. On this site, we don't have an RSL who wants to get involved. We have looked at this site with more than one RSL. And it's to do with economies of scale. It's too small. The acquisition and the sort of the infrastructure and overheads, they would be spread over the whole site for an RSL. And what they're telling us is that 10 to 15 units are challenging for them to make up, because although they will get grant from Scottish Government, the vast proportion of the cost of the site is made up from their private finance and their capital.
Thanks, that helps a lot. So I suppose the sort of question that I've kind of got in my head is going from having, potentially 10 homes down to, well, it's 310,000. So in terms of how much the developer would have been expected to put in, 310,000 is a lot less than 10 homes, but what we're saying is that would be an equal amount of input what they would have done if it was just them developing the 10 houses.
It's a negotiated. They would get them as an affordable housing site. They would get it's at a discount. So it's not 10 units aren't handed over to an RSL. They're purchasing them or purchasing the land at lower cost.
Thank you. That's all my questions.
Billy Kirk.
Just to clarify with regards to the financial viability thing, I only mentioned that because it's mentioned at the last two meetings, and for the 8 years I've been on the committee, so in the last two meetings it's been mentioned. And for clarity, I'm not in favour of it, because whether somebody's can afford to build the house or houses, I don't think that's in our remit. But that was just to clarify. It was only because I heard at the last two meetings it coming up. Thanks, convener.
Well, yeah. Any other questions for the officers? Oh, Mr. Bowes.
I like the it's worrying.
It wasn't disappointing.
I understand the way it works. They're bought by the RSL at a discounted price, usually about 10%, if I remember rightly. And in this case, it doesn't work for the RSLs for this project on the grant side. Now, originally the project was 10 social rented properties. The 310,000, is that based on the 6 that it is now, or is that based on the 10, which would have been the 25%?
I'm not sure what you mean by the 6 that it is now.
Right, so at the moment there's 34 houses and 34 houses and 6 flats. Is it still 10?
Yeah, it's still a 25% of the overall unit numbers.
So it's still based on 10 properties.
Yep.
And if I'm right, is it the land value is that it's based on? And just for clarity, just in case people think it's the actual house, there's a committed sum. It's purely the land value, isn't it? If we don't agree, where does it go? Because if they can't be delivered and we can't get RSLs to buy them, we can't get them with grant funding. Exactly where would this go?
The applicant has an opportunity to appeal the decision ultimately. the applicant also may wish to expand on what a decision of that matter would mean in terms of the rest of the site or their own viability for developing the site. But ultimately, yes, they have the ability to appeal the decision. As for the likelihood of where that appeal goes, if that was the case, it's difficult to tell. But there'd be similar process of consideration being gone through by any reporter looking at it. So yeah, the same questions would be asked ultimately.
And can I ask a supplementary to that? So if it goes to appeal, will Falkirk Council have to do an input to that, and then will that cost us in time of officers actually feeding into that appeal?
Yeah, generally each appeal to Scottish ministers would involve officer time in preparing a response to any appeal statement.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gary. It's quite an illuminating question that was. Helped to make my mind up. So, any more questions for officers? No. Can we move to the deputations, please, starting with the agent. Morning, gents. Could you just introduce yourselves, please?
Good morning. My name's Daniel Harrington. I'm the agent for the application.
Good morning. My name's Malcolm Crawford. I'm Senior Design Manager for Carmichael Homes.
Thank you. You'll have 10. You received the paperwork for this? Yeah. You'll have 10 minutes to state your case, either 5 each or whatever suits you. Okay.
I'll address you. Thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to speak today. I'm joined by Malcolm Crawford from Carmichael Homes, so he can help address any questions that the committee might have. There's obviously been quite a detailed discussion already on this, so I'll try not to cover too much ground again. So as set out in the report and explained, Carmichael Homes have been through an extensive process to find options to deliver affordable housing on this local development of 40 homes. And there was extensive pre-application discussion with officers on the variations to ensure that this was an appropriate proposal that we were submitting to the council. Initially, Carmichael Homes became involved with the development of this site in looking at the site for entirely affordable housing, and we're looking at redesigning the proposals. Affordable housing is a core part of Carmichael Homes business, and they're delivering affordable homes in neighbouring authorities, mostly in Stirling, with on-site development at Clean and Cowie currently. As you've heard, unfortunately, grant funding was not available for the delivery of the site due to cuts in funding that occurred shortly after their involvement in the site. An investigation of alternative site options, funding for the 25% was not available either. And there was also a conclusion reached that the delivery of 10 homes as a standalone in this location would not be of interest to the RSLs, which you've heard about already. So therefore, to see any homes development on the site, the council's preference was for a commuted sum or a commuted payment that can deliver affordable housing elsewhere in the local areas. Carmichael Homes have been progressing with the development on site under the current planning permission on the understanding that this was an agreed position and there was no real alternative to the delivery of affordable housing. And there are currently purchases that are waiting to conclude on these first 10 homes once this amendment is agreed. So Carmichael Homes is very reliant on the committee's support of this application today. And myself and Malcolm would be happy to answer any questions that the committee have in making your decision today. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much for that. Are there any questions? Councillor Redmond.
Thanks. Could you just clarify, you said started a sort of extensive consultation with social landlords, and could you clarify the different ones you approached, and was there any fruitful, was there any interested in others, and how long did that process carry on for?
I don't have the exact number. I think it was 3. I think we approached in the end. All of the RSLs were coming back, and I think, as we've discussed at the meeting already, that it's just too small a number to take on board. So from that point of view, financial viability for them is, you know, a lot less. So I tend to looking at much larger numbers for that to actually get that whole that set up, that engine, if you like, to run properly. And 10 units is not a great number for them in that particular area.
I suppose my sort of second question, obviously the council's really keen to get more council housing and get social housing built. One of the problems when we're building our own council housing is the high cost. It's £250,000 a unit, even when we own the land. So what sort of unit cost would you be looking at to build maybe one of these houses?
I don't have costs exactly, but what I can say in the construction industry over the last 10 years, costs are skyrocketing. They haven't got any easier to build homes. It's difficult, and I think that potentially sometimes, you know, values that are associated, you know, almost from a couple of years ago, are actually outdated now. So prices are continuing to rise. We're seeing that year on year. In terms of numbers that we've got in calculation, sometimes the policy may be a year or two, you know, behind the actual what's happening on site, behind the actual prices. Houses are becoming expensive things to build, and because of that, I think that's where a lot of councils will see it across, you know, all of Scotland. That it is difficult to try and fund or find funding for housing that's of a reasonable value. We approach our particular designs that we've had on this site. We looked at the site plan and we redesigned a lot of the houses on the site to a slightly smaller footprint, try and keep costs down when we were looking at putting these houses in, or the whole site as an affordable site, to try and, you know, mitigate some of the costs while still complying with planning and building regulations. So we have looked at a lot of options to try and get the site to work from a financial standpoint. It just kept coming back that, well, one, there wasn't, you know, relevant funding from Scottish Government, and the affordable unit was quickly becoming an option that, you know, we couldn't consider.
Thank you. And my very final question, just briefly, can I talk over types of houses that will be on this site? Will it be starter homes?
Sure. So, yeah, when we first got the site, the floor plans themselves were slightly larger. I want to say we reduced them by about 10 to 12% to try and bring those lines back, or bring those prices back in line with what you would term starter homes. We've got a couple of terrace units that are on the front. The majority form semi-detached units, and there's a couple of detached units that's on the site as well. Proposal has a block of flats at the end as well to try and mitigate cost, build cost, etc. Keep all that down. So we have looked at that, and we have gone through a process of, let's say, trimming the fat to get to where we've got to, in the way that the houses are as well. The back end of the site was redesigned somewhat as well to make it a bit more efficient from a build point of view, keep costs down, and, you know, a bit more cohesive to what was happening at the front of the site. A lot of units that were even slightly reorientated and drawn in a little bit. So there was changes made to the site. We have gone through a process to try and mitigate some of the build costs and mitigate some of the costs that we would face, to keep those prices much more in line with what's in the area.
Thanks. So I suppose, to summarise that, whilst they're not going to be social housing, it's still very much aimed at first-time buyers and in some sort of definition affordable. Don't know if you could say the exact amount or whatever the retail them for.
Yeah, it was. I don't know the cost yet in terms of final costs. I think our website's live, so I think you'll be able to get it from there. But it's 2 and 3 bed houses, or 3 bed houses, I think it's on the site itself. So we've kept them in that region. You know, we've not went out to higher end, you know, 4 or 5 bed houses, which some sites can take. We think they're right for the area. In the area, you have got areas of terrace housing, you've got small cottage flat areas, you have got some detached units in the area as well. But it's more about in keeping with what's in the area and keeping that, you know, that level of starter home affordability for local area.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks a lot. That's all my questions. Cheers.
Thanks, Councillor Redmond. Billy Buchanan. Billy Kerr.
Thanks, Convener. Just a couple of questions for me. A question I asked Mr. Brown Have you any other sites nearby?
Yeah, I mean, maybe just to address, I think one of the questions that came up was, you guys don't know us. It's our first sort of foray into Falkirk. Carmichael Homes are not a big company. We're not a Taylor Wimpey or a Persimmon. We've currently only got 3 sites active. We're looking to get maybe 5 sites by the end of the year. Affordable housing is one of the mainstay parts of what we build. We've just completed a site next door in Stirling in Clean for 23 affordable units, including 2 full wheelchair accessible units in there. So it's not about just building affordable homes. Sometimes we're getting the mix correct as well. So we've just completed that. We've got another site again in Stirling area in Cowie for 59 units, and that whole site is for affordable housing as well. So it's not something we wanted to, some of the big developers, you're absolutely right, try and shy away and, use the system to just get a commuted sum to get away from building affordable housing and then, put profit first. We're not about that. We're building, as I say, 2 sites, or have completed 1 site, but another site already, and are quite happy. And I think we approached the council at the time to look at this entire site, being affordable housing. But unfortunately, as we've discussed, the funding just isn't there at the moment. But more than happy. I think there was a question about could we look at another site and make that entirely affordable. That is absolutely an option, and if we can find a site in Falkirk and look to do that, then yeah, and the funding was there, then we would absolutely approach that as a fully affordable site.
Thank you very much. A couple of questions. So this you maybe know you can be able to answer this. So has the grant funding decreased or increased recently?
From Scottish Government? I don't know the absolute internal machinations of how it all works in terms of the Scottish Government. Some councils we find are able to secure sites in the SHIP quicker and get that that secured funding. Things change sometimes even when something is allocated in the SHIP. Sites get bigger, sites get smaller. More land becomes available, and there is a process through that where you can either apply for more or you look for a reduction for less. As I said earlier, house costs are always going up. A lot of times in the SHIP where land can be identified, and it can take a couple of years to come through the pipe, as it were, to get delivered on site. And that can lead to a disparity in what the valuation from the beginning is to the end product is. I don't know if funding from Scottish Government itself is decreasing. I can't comment on that. I don't know how that works, but from what we're seeing is it does appear to be councils throughout government. Some of them are, let's say, they have a SHIP funding that's well secured or put forward, and other councils, I think, for some reason, seem to struggle to get to that position. Whether that's through Scottish Government funding or some other reasons, I don't know.
Right, okay. Maybe an unfair question to ask you. And my last question is, what size of site would an RSL be comfortable in taking?
That is a good question. Yeah, I mean, RSLs are obviously their own entity, they're their own company themselves. It would be a great question if we could get to the point. But I've seen RSLs where maybe 10 units in an area like that's viable if they've got maybe another site down the road where they've got another 10 units, and the thing starts to add up. I can't give you an exact number. I'm not an RSL. I don't know how their internal functions work, but they have to make money as any other company. As I say, we've just completed a site, 24 units. It was direct, in fairness, with Stirling Council, which I know is slightly different, and the council will take in smaller developments or smaller unit numbers rather than RSLs. But unfortunately, I don't have an answer, but it's a great question.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Convener.
Right. Councillor Bowes.
Thank you, Convener. Yes, I like the fact that you do an amount of social housing projects on their own. That's positive. Have you thought, and I don't know if this is part of discussion, and I know there's a fund that opens and closes at various times, which is a shared equity fund. Are you going to be promoting that? Because that would at least then give people access to going to buy the houses if they were able to access the shared equity fund. If that was something that you as a company were promoting, it would give me that bit of comfort that although they're not RSL and they're not council houses, there at least then there's an opportunity for first-time buyers to start looking at them, because it's quite a significant number. I think it's 60-40 is the sort of maximum split on it. And given your, which seems to be a bit of social conscience in what you're doing, I just wondered if you were actually going to be promoting that.
We haven't got any plans to do that. That's not to say that we couldn't look at something like that. But right now we haven't looked at that yet. No. We'll take a note and make sure we investigate that.
Any other questions? The deputation? No? Thanks very much, guys, for coming along. Thanks for your input. Can we ask Councillor McCabe to come forward, please? Good morning, sir. And I don't think I have to give you any instructions.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much. Thanks, convener. I think it's fairly self-explanatory why I called this application in. I was very pleased to see that the director had agreed it was appropriate to have the matter considered by the committee. It is a variation to conditions of an existing planning application. First of all, can I express my sincere thanks to the two gentlemen from Carmichael Homes. I thought they gave an excellent presentation. Mr. Crawford alluded to the fact that if you have a look at this at face value, this is a developer trying to take the cheap option by not building the affordable housing, given a committed sum, which is not going to be the same with that. I totally accept that Carmichael is in a totally different position. Their almost their ethos, if you like, is to be building affordable homes, and I totally respect that. I totally accept that. As you're all aware, we are in the middle of a housing crisis identified by both governments. I'm personally of the opinion that we shouldn't be acceptable of commuting sums in lieu of affordable housing. Council policy is to encourage affordable housing, and that was agreed upon and acceptable to developers at the time. It's now proved unacceptable or unviable. I was very pleased to hear Billy Kerr pick up on the question of viability. As you quite rightly stated, within the past couple of months, you've had brought in front of you a number of applications where there was a great deal of questioning about viability of those sites. And one of the questions I was having is, why did that not happen on this application? We then heard that the involvement of RSLs, was proving difficult to get them to come on board. I'm aware that RSLs typically look at affordable units and they tend to look at 10 and above, as that's when they really like to get involved. That's when it becomes viable for them. So learning that, I think it's been great this morning, because what it does is it focuses in on council policy. Do we have to be thinking about changing council policy now? Councillor Sinclair highlighted that this isn't about the viability of the site, but this is about the viability of the 10 affordable units. So this brings into question the whole council policy of attaching a 25% affordable housing requirement to a relatively small site like this, which can easily be overturned once you've approved planning permission. You then go and say, well, rather than do that, can we just go for a commuted sum? So I think it's been well worthwhile bringing this in front of the committee. I always thought it should have come in front of the committee. It shouldn't have been handled by delegated powers. It should have come in front of the committee. And it's now, well, the committee will make its decision today. And I don't really have any, I'm not for or against it. The committee will make its decision, and I'll be perfectly acceptable by whatever decision that is made. But what I'm highlighting here is we have a problem in the council with our affordable housing policy at the minute. That 25% of affordable housing to any planning application that's submitted is not going to be viable for 50 houses or less. Once you start to go into 50 houses and above, it becomes a major planning application. And that's when your big players, your Persimmons and your Wimpeys of the world, they can take on board the question of supplying affordable housing. That's pretty much all I've got to say. As I say, I'm not, I'm not against the application. I'm not for the application. I just wanted to highlight to the committee. I think it's if we, as a council, are looking to be promoting the building of affordable housing, we might have to be changing our policy in some way. That this only impacts on major developments. We then have the problem, how do we encourage affordable housing in smaller developments? And again, if I can just reiterate, I get the greatest respect for the two gentlemen from Carmichael. I thought they made a great case. I don't have any questions at all about the deputation, the submission that they made in front of you. Thank you very much, Convener.
Thank you, Councillor. You can take. Oh, sorry. No, sorry. I can't. I'm sorry. Okay. Thanks, but is there any questions to Councillor McCabe? No. Okay. Thanks very much, Councillor McCabe. Questions? You can.
Thank goodness for that,
your seat.
I've got to take my missus. She wants dropped off. Thanks very much. I might not even stay at the end. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, now can we go back to Officer Brown?
Yeah, I'm not sure there's much for me to add there. I don't know whether or not housing colleagues want to come in on any of the points raised, perhaps in relation to some questions there about whether or not the grant funding has increased or decreased. They may be able to shed more light on that, but there's nothing really there that
Thanks, Kevin. Thank you. Ladies, would you like to?
There's a report going to Housing Executive tomorrow on the Strategic Housing Investment Plan. I don't want to preempt that discussion. What I would say is the grant was reduced, but it had increased back up to probably, I would say, 23-24 level. We're sitting around about the grant level is 12 million. But we only know for 1 year. We don't know what it's going to be for future years. We'll find that out in January 2026.
Okay, thanks very much for that. Yeah, can we open it up to debate now, please, members? Councillor Redmond.
Just a couple of questions. I wrote down that 25%, I think Councillor McCabe raised it, 25% doesn't work for smaller sites. So if it was less than the 25%, would that reduce the amount of funding that we were able to, 310,000, if it wasn't 25%, I mean, that would be less?
Is that to Kevin?
So the 25% is set out in the development plan policies. How that is then met is dependent on site characteristics and constraints and RSLs and grant funding and all the rest of it in terms of going through the various options which are set out in the supplementary guidance. The policy doesn't currently give an option within there to look at a lesser percentage provision on the site. So that would be a step away from the policy as it stands.
So is the 25%, is that set in the national planning framework rather than council's development?
It's the council's local development plan, which dictates that, because in certain areas it's only 10%, whereas in this portion of the district it's 25%.
Thanks. And then my last question was £310,000. What will that money be spent on or invested in?
Or for the ladies, yeah.
Community sums have to be used in that area. It will be used towards any other sites that come forward in that area, or we will use it for buybacks.
Thanks. So by that area, do we mean Reddenmuir Head or the Lower Braes ward?
It will be that, my understanding is that it will be the Polmont Rural South area.
Thanks. I think after everything we've heard, I'd be quite happy to move the officer recommendation and for granting the amendment. It was comforting to see that, you know, they're not big 4 and 5 bedroom houses. They are aimed at first time buyers, affordable, maybe starter family homes. So I think that's quite good. I quite like Councillor Bowsey's idea about maybe the shared equity. I think that'd be good if the applicants could maybe explore that a wee bit more, but happy to move the officer recommendation.
Gary Kerr.
Thanks, convener. Just one question. Kevin kind of touched on it regarding percentage of social housing. It is different in different areas. Kevin, that's right, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Certain areas of the district require 25%. Some require 10%. That's perhaps 15. The reasons behind that are perhaps maybe better explained by housing in terms of how they've come to that position.
Ladies, yeah.
That's informed by the housing need and demand assessment. The areas which have the highest shortfall of affordable housing are set at 25%, and the areas with a lower shortfall are at 15%.
Thank you very much to both of you. I'm like Councillor Redmond, I'm quite content with what's been said, and I would second his motion to support the officer's recommendations. And I just think that listening to the delegation this morning, I think smaller companies like Carmichael, we should be supporting these companies to try and help them flourish in Falkirk. If their aim is to build social houses in our area, we really should be trying to support them as much as possible. Thanks, Ken.
Okay, thank you, Billy Kerr. Anyone else? No? We'll go to Mr. Moody. Got a motion and a second.
Yes, thank you, Convener. We have a motion and a second. There's no other amendment being made, so I think the question is to start. The members agree.
Agreed.
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 Okay, thank you very much, everybody. And we will close at that, the last item. Thanks very much for your time, everyone.